Right. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to Video Stream Asia. This is an initiative organized by Devio Media. I am Karan Tarani from Elara Capital. I am your moderator for the first panel today, in which we are going to talk about opportunities for Indian OTTs in Asia and emerging nations. So I have a very varied variety of panelists who are going to discuss this topic in more detail. Let me just share some kind of overview in terms of what are the kind of topics of discussion we're going to have for today's panel. So if you look at India broadcaster-based OTTs, India broadcasters typically, they've been very strong in the business in terms in the content business. The kind of content they've created, has gone places over years. We've seen many of the shows getting dubbed into multiple languages globally and getting distributed. Now, the shift from TV to digital has kind of made things much more simpler for them. The delivery is seamless, and the scale or the expansion is something which is kind of very it's like an attractive opportunity for the broadcasters to distribute their content globally in every small part of the world. So today we're just going to speak and discuss in terms of the various opportunities which are available globally for these India-based OTTs. I have got the heads of multiple OTTs with me today. So I would just like to introduce all the panelists, themselves briefly, and then we can move on to the Q&A. So I'll just start off with Manpreet. Manpreet, you can just quickly give introduction about yourself.
Hello everyone, I'm Manpreet and I work with Eros Now. I had two businesses over here. One is Eros Now, distribution and alliances for the Indian as well as for the global market, and the second is the technical business.
Right, thanks. Siddharth?
Hi, I'm Siddharth. I work in Hungama, and I drive the business.
Right, thanks. Ahmed?
Hi, my name is Arman. I work for Robi Axiata, which is the second largest telco in Bangladesh. Incidentally, we also own an OTT platform called Binge, which actually has multi-screen, including our own OTT box, large screen and small screen. Thank you.
Thanks. Abhar?
Hey, hi guys. I'm Abhar. I work with ZEE5 Global. I drive strategic partnerships and digital growth strategy for ZEE5 in global markets.
Thanks. Vishnu?
Hi, my name is Vishnu. I'm one of the co-founders of Voijoy. We are Bengali OTT streaming platform.
Right. Thanks. So, like as you see clearly, we've got a wide variety of panelists, the heads of different OTTs who are into different parts, of content. Some are into film, some are into regional content, some are into basically overall in terms of Hindi content as such. So, I think my first question will be, to all the panelists, each of you all, in terms of the order of the introduction which we did, if you all can, kind of share some kind of insights about your homegrown OTT. Basically how things have moved, in the last 2-3 years. Of course, we saw the impact of COVID. That would have been a big positive, for digital consumption. But just some general sense, in terms of KPIs, percentage of time spent, percentage of revenue which is coming from overseas. What are the kind of consumption dynamics in terms of overseas audience? If you could just share some insights in brief. So quickly, I'll just start off with Manpreet first.
So hello once again. Last 2 years, I think like they have been pretty much exciting there for the entire digital as an industry, and especially this OTT, because people actually have migrated, in fact, in their viewing patterns from the linear viewing of content there to the digital one. So here the entire universe have actually gathered together to contribute over here into this evolution. You talk of the technology, from the telcos to the ISPs and to the content which is getting consumed over there by the consumers, the creation of the content which like the OTTs and the broadcasters have actually come up here with. Over here to the percentage increases, in fact, that what we guys have seen, they are good double-digit percentage numbers that what we guys have seen over here with regards to content getting consumed here in the international market. And the best part here is the acceptance for the Indian content. Widely not many local partners are actually showing up an interest here in collaborating, which has again contributed significantly to the growth of Erasmus as a platform.
Right. Thanks for that perspective. We'll just move on to Siddharth. If you can just, share in terms of what Hungama plans are, what kind of subscriber base you have overseas, what is the kind of, percentage of revenue that comes from overseas, how big opportunity it is basically.
No, thanks, Tarun and Karan, and thanks Deepak for having me on the panel. In a nutshell, Hungama is currently available in close to about 190 plus countries. We have a fairly large international presence. People are aware for the last over 15 odd years, be it in the space of music and now on the video space. Specifically because of COVID, we've had on the video specifically, we've had over 50 to 60% increase from a KPI perspective. And for us, the video piece is all about more usage. So it's all linked to time spent in that sense. Specifically for the international markets, there is roughly about 20% of our revenues that come out for our video business out of the international markets. And there we've seen a 60% plus increase in consumption and usage. We are a lot different from my colleagues here on the panel because we're not only a South Asian service to the world, we are actually a lot more localized. So take, for example, Sri Lanka, we have the largest Sinhalese representation from a catalog perspective within our containers. Or if you were to go to Myanmar, we would have Khmer content. If you were to go to Cambodia, you would have Burmese in that sense. So in the overall construct, we are a South Asian service that goes into North American markets, into Europe, and we've seen great growth of the South Asian service, be it in Poland, Switzerland, Germany. And if you go into Africa, apart from the South Asian community that is there, we are also localizing content in Swahili, in Zulu, all of that's available. So yes, it's been an interesting build out in revenue terms as well. And overall, there is roughly about a ability, because you are linked in with telecom and you've got seamless connectivity, you can have very, very healthy subscription growth in these markets.
Right. Moving on to Abar, actually, ZEE5 has done phenomenally well. Zee as a brand in terms of the channel, they've done phenomenally well. They've got shows which have been dubbed. They have very strong recall value. So, can you just highlight something in terms of, what's worked into your favor? Because Zee already has a very strong brand recall globally. And, with ZEE5 coming in, I'm sure it would have made things much more easier for you. So what are the kind of content consumption trends? That's one. And second, of course, we've seen the likes of, Hotstar and Star, announcing some kind of not cord cutting, but some kind of initiative wherein, they are not going to basically provide linear TV, sports content, go directly via Hotstar. So are you also having any of such kind of plans? Because I'm sure international linear subscription also is kind of seeing a downfall in the last 2 to 3 years.
No, absolutely. I think to answer your latter question first, I think the exodus of key broadcasters from the markets that you mentioned is not because, in my opinion, it is not as an incentive for cord cutters to switch from linear to digital. It just stopped making mathematical sense in those markets, and hence that happened. Because if you see the markets where they've exited, these are markets where cord cutting is a natural phenomenon. These are markets which are evolved to an extent where you do not really need to give the consumers an incentive to switch, because that is how these markets function, which is why these are markets where direct to consumer a direct to consumer acquisition of subscribers is the key metric for growth to happen. So I think the exodus has been because it just stopped making P&L sense in those markets. To answer your first question, yes, it has been hugely advantageous to go into international markets, especially because Zee has such a phenomenal presence in most of these markets, especially from a South Asian diaspora point of view. but it has also been very peculiar, very tedious, in the sense that you are not addressing a very homogenized base. It's like trying to cater to 1,000 different Indias across the world, because of how they've migrated, what kind of taste they currently have, what generations are we trying to target. But yes, as a starting point, as a starter proposition for these audiences, the content has been hugely beneficial. But we have realized over the past 3 years that it is equally important to invest in new original content, which is why you'll see that we have arguably been by far the most prolific in creating original content, and some of our content pieces have been received really well across the masses. So yes, it's been a mix of both. To get a foot in the door, Zee's legacy content has been hugely beneficial, but we've tried to diversify, and we've tried to invest into a whole lot of new original content for each of these markets.
Right. And any plans to go direct digital? Not maybe now, but maybe sometime in the future, because of course, linear TV, as you rightly said, the business doesn't make sense now. So how far away are we from that kind of a situation?
Well, I think, honestly speaking, not a question for me to answer, but I think there are plans in certain markets. How long and how intensive the decision is going to be is something that we'll have to see for ourselves.
Right. Vishnu, if you can come in here, your OTT app is primarily Bengali content, a very niche market. Regional is, of course, a very, very big opportunity in India today. But over and above that, I think there's a big opportunity in your Asia market, primarily markets like Bangladesh, which are there. So how has the response moved, on that? Because you are, I think, a homegrown OTT, primarily into Bengal content. You had no earlier brand name or no TV channels as such, largely operating into overseas markets. So how have you kind of, gone through this entire process?
So the way we think about this is that Bengali is a language spoken by about 300 million people globally. There are about 100 million Bengali speakers in India. There are about 180 million Bengali speakers in Bangladesh, and then there's the diaspora of Indian and Bangladeshi Bengalis. We feel that's a big enough market to go after. Even if we get a fraction of those customers of that population as customers, I think we'll be having a sizable business. So that's the first. As an example, today 40% of our revenue comes from outside India, and that's also on the back of different pricing that exists in India. Internationally, we price at $10 a month. India, we price at about $600, 600 rupees a year. So very, very disparate, pricing. But I think that's a difference in the propensity of people to pay. From a brand perspective, I think we've been doing this for the last 25 years. We're the largest producer of content per se from East India. We produce about 160 films. We've acquired the rights of another 500 odd. Plus, having the ability to create a lot of television content over the last 10 years allowed us to create a mix of use our expertise in having created a lot of films and TV shows, and bring that to what we call as the third form of storytelling, which is called web content, original content, whether they call it films, whether they call it web series, episodics. I think that capability really helps us, create a very targeted set of content towards one particular community, if you like. We do double content in all the other languages where we partner with the likes of all the telcos, etc. They also seem to be very popular. But I think we sort of, like I said, it's kept us busy for the last 25 years, and we don't have any immediate plans to change that.
Right, great. Thank you for the initiative. We also have a very interesting participant on the panel today. We've got Arman, basically, who represents the content distribution side. So Arman, I would like to bring in here, we obviously discussed a brief in terms of what these OTT heads are talking about in terms of where the business is shaping up. But, just to get your insights on two things. Firstly, on this data cost being lower in India, of course, that's one of the bigger reasons why video consumption has actually gone off the roof. And I think this momentum is here to stay for at least in the near to medium term. But if you can just highlight some kind of trends in terms of the data cost, the broadband penetration in the emerging nations, or probably the countries where, you've basically worked upon. I mean, how are things shaping up there, versus India?
Yeah, thanks, Karan. So on this new normal, everything is supernatural. I mean, on the broadband penetration perspective and all. I mean, if you think about Bangladesh, having a penetration of 5 million fixed broadband in a small country of 144,000 square kilometers. Within this 1 year of time, it's now hitting around 9.5 million broadband users, predominantly for the students who are studying online, and then people also have doing work from home. So the demand of the broadband penetration is really high, and surprisingly, it's across the nation. It's not only in the urban areas. So it's a densely populated country, and the people need broadband. So there are issues on the quality, on the total quality management, but at least it's really increasing. And if you talk about the mobile broadband, of the 4G penetration is around 103 million. In total, right now we are running around 113 million broadband users in Bangladesh, actually, which is a good opportunity for all of us on the streaming business and all data hungry products from the operator perspective.
Right, very interesting. And also, if you can, touch base upon this OTT partnership phenomena. I'm sure OTTs right now, it's like the new normal, right? Any OTT who want to scale up, they have to partner with telcos, OEMs, and smart TVs put together. So what is the kind of insights, or what are the kind of developments in Bangladesh market from that perspective? Are the local OTTs there also kind of very heavily dependent on these kind of partnerships, or are they going the direct B2C route basically?
Right. So we had, I think it's a kind of an informal number, but we are told that there's around 433 million revenue generation from Netflix alone, without setting a single office in Bangladesh, right? So no wonder that Hoichoi is there, ZEE5 is there, and we have seen the traction, and that's the reason why the operators have also come into the OTT play. And as my friend from Hoichoi was saying, Vishnu, the content is the king here, and there has been phenomenal contents coming up. The originals, I mean, Binge came up with these originals, which was kind of a blow into the fraternity, because they always were used to watching it in Netflix and Amazon Prime, but not in the local OTTs. And we also have good originals even from ZEE5, which is bringing a lot of contents. So now it has become a kind of a genre and the talk of the town. Interestingly, Bangladesh is 7th largest Facebook community country of the world. So if you go to the Facebook pages now, it's all about talking about content. Okay, Hoichoi launched this, ZEE5 launched this, Binge launched this, and it's for all of us. It's also very interestingly for our case, it's a blend of linear TV and VOD. So there is a lot of opportunity lies there, and since it's still less than 300,000 digital cable penetration in Bangladesh, having around 23 million television base, it's still a virgin market. It's a huge greenfield. So this is bound to grow in a phenomenal way in Bangladesh.
Right. Also, one more thing, just a couple of points here. So, have you seen, people leapfrog technology? Like probably rather than having a second TV household, they've moved to digital directly. That's one trend basically. And second trend, of course, the trend in terms of ARPUs and the payment capacity. I mean, how open are people in terms of paying for content on digital? Because India, as we know, that people are very resistant. There is a small audience, niche audience for Netflix, Amazon, who are paying for content, but otherwise generally people are resistant for paying for content online. So what are the kind of trends in Bangladesh for that?
Very good question, Karan. And that's where the worry is actually. So I can foresee a bloodbath unnecessarily coming up again, because there are a lot of disruption happening to give freebies, unlimited packages, unlimited content, unlimited TVs. Maybe there is a long-term plan for SVOD and TVOD, but what is actually happening is you cannot actually guarantee, or you cannot secure your investment on the network, platform, and also content, right? I mean, so I don't know, the time will tell whether this will be a sustainable solution, that some of the competitions are coming up with free options, or even to some extent keyboard and SVOD option. But we personally believe for the self-sustaining ecosystem, we need to have a premium model, whether it's a weekly, daily, or annual tariff. And I think that is the right way for the sustainability. We need to have patience and a lot of money, a deep pocket. So time will tell whoever will win, whoever is having the deep pocket, and to continue the momentum of that. But we must collaborate. And I'm even talking to different partners of mine to even have a joint production of content. because it's unnecessary bloodbath. And it's a positive element to tell you that there are 4 or 5 local strong OTT players that are coming up. I mean, the leading newspaper is coming up with OTT service. The leading valuable service is coming with OTT service. So best part is they can actually leverage more on the cost side than any of us that we are present in this webinar, because I can see even right now there is a 25 to 30% cost reduction in case of the homogeneous or similar production of content. That actually worries me, because we go through different processes, different policies and all, and they actually go through in a non-conventional way. That's why they actually save a lot of cost. So it is important for us to ensure synergy, and if we plan to do a disruption, it will not only kill us, it will also kill the whole market. So the momentum that's just coming up, it's gonna actually die out. So we don't want to repeat like the Indian case that we just give things for free and free and free, and then we don't make anything out of it. This long tail business model will not be sustainable for sure in case of Bangladesh market. I think that's what I believe.
So I think it's an equal thing. What is there in India, right? I mean, people are not paying for content. It's a similar trend. It's a pain point for all the countries, for all the emerging nations as such, basically, right? So Arman, I think we let you go at that. I think all the participants, Arman had some personal emergencies, so he has to leave the panel midway. Thank you very much, Arman, for sharing your insights. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone. I will welcome you again to come to Bangladesh when things are normal. So till then, take care.
Thanks,
Right.
Arman.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Right.
Bye, Avar.
So moving on, to the other topics of discussion. So again, this discussion on this distribution strategy, and moving on to telcos. Siddharth, if you can share some kind of insights here. Of course, India, we've seen a situation wherein there was a point of time, or maybe there is a point of time even now, wherein some of the OTTs are being paid MGs, right? Of course, an India market telco is very, very consolidated, right? So I'm sure the bargaining power is more in favor of telcos. What are the kind of trends we've seen for this arrangement between the OTT and telcos and the other distributors globally? Are they MG based? I mean, who has a better edge there? If you can just throw some insights on that.
So Karan, actually, if you ask me, I believe it's a partnership and it's symbiotic. Okay, it's not about does the telco have the upper hand, or the content OTT partner has the upper hand. I believe each of us in our own way have our own business and target objectives that we want to be driving. Today we are in partnership with the telecom network because symbiotic, both of us need each other. How does the guarantee structure work? Is it a PSM driven guarantee? Is it a revenue share driven guarantee? It all depends on business models and where and in what stage is that partnership, and what are the objectives that the partnership wants to drive. Okay, you switch this to other parts of the world where you could be going into bundles of a data pack on services because he has a South Asian pack out there and he wants to make your pack available within that container. Okay, vis-a-vis, you could be in a market like Cambodia where we are connected with all telecom networks. We are a consumer business where we only use billing relationships with the telecom network. We have no other relationship. Billing in the form of, today I pay a Google store, Apple App Store. I am paying the telco for him providing me a billing connectivity. And we drive our own communication, we drive our own marketing, we acquire our own users, we handle the complete value chain totally within the concern. Today, when you look at India, obviously there are massive bundles out there because the lay of the land is built on the fact that everyone is driving core growth, and data and content is extremely important for connected users, for that massive explosion of data that needs to be consumed by the user, in turn habit formation. So very clearly, it is specifically linked to opportunities based on what is the objective that both the entities want to be driving.
Right, but we've seen instances here wherein some of the broadcaster OTTs, India-based broadcast OTTs, have had some kind of standoff with telcos, and the deals have actually fallen off. We've seen instances of that sort. So the point I'm trying to make is that then where does an OTT go because of heavy over dependence on the particular telecom provider or over dependence of the aggregator is something which is going to play against them in the next 2 to 3 years, right? Because I mean, the telco provider has got like multiple options, right, in terms of the number of OTTs. You know how fragmented that market is versus the telecom industry, which is highly consolidated. So what kind of how can these standoffs be get addressed basically?
So actually, it's not about standoff. It's about business interests, Karan. Okay. Take for example. Now let's shift this. Go 10 years back. Yeah. You had broadcasters. They were cable operators. There used to be standoffs every time. There used to be a set of channels that used to be missing out of a cable operator because the cable operator was renegotiating his contracts. Yeah. In the same way today, you are seeing the first advent of that getting played out. Yeah. But if we fundamentally, I mean, as Hungama, I can state to you, I do not believe my business is built on telcos. Vishnu will speak for himself, Manpreet will speak for himself, but we are crystal clear. You have a partnership today going with the telecom network because it's a win-win situation for both the parties. That is why we are in business together. Tomorrow, if a telecom network doesn't align to my larger objective, I will go to the consumer directly, and I'm already going to my consumer directly. And what Vishnu was saying, markets are big enough in India for you to have a retail play. And I would presume that each of us in our own ways are describing and putting together strategies from a retail perspective, because please understand that we are playing in a business where you've got the global OTT players here as well. Today, all of us know the kind of investment that they're bringing into content and working towards acquiring local branded content for their platforms. Yeah? If we are surviving that onslaught, and each of us are building our own business structures in the way we want to drive our content creation, content aggregation objective, and we believe that the consumer will pay for that. That's the core relevancy, no? On that side of the coin. In the same way, distribution has its own core relevancy in play.
Right.
So the way I look at it is it's business as usual. Today, this is getting played out. Objectives will change. Each of us are running our own objectives, whichever which way. Because I don't have a deal with an ex-telco, it's not that I'm going to shut up my business here.
No, but of course, there's a severe impact on the business. So I just wanted the impact of the business, how severe.
But in the same way, Karan, each of us are betting on other formats of distribution. Take, for example, wallet, payment systems.
Correct.
We are going out, and each of us are in our own way are democratizing how we acquire the paid user. Yeah?
Right.
It is not a telco dependency alone today.
Right. Let me bring in Abhar also here again in terms of the point of distribution before I complete that topic exactly. So Abhar, if you can just highlight what exactly is the difference, between going to a customer through a partner, be it a telco, OEM, or a smart TV, and going to the customer directly, the cost of acquisition for a customer, some kind of metrics you can share there, and globally, what is the kind of money involved here in terms of cost of acquisition directly?
So I think I actually completely concur with what Siddharth said, because gone are the days of the VAS era when this relationship used to be, client vendor. It is now a partner relationship. Even in the lowest rung markets where the propensity to pay isn't as high, like the likes of Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and Pakistan. These are billing heavy markets. Telcos are betting a whole lot of their business interests on trying to drive revenues through the billing mechanism, and it works pretty synergetically with OTTs because the price points are low. They are very well fitted with the wallet size that a customer has, and enabling that purchase through a mobile wallet just works well for both of them. If you consider the more evolved markets like UK, Australia, Singapore, Canada, these are the same telcos who are doubling up as quad play operators. So, and it just works very well for OTTs because the connected device experience is what drives usage and growth in those markets. So it's the same telco that you are partnering with in those markets. So I think it is kind of immaterial to debate on whether there is over dependence on telcos. I think if at all there is, it is mutual. The need is mutual. The business interests are pretty mutual as well. To answer your second question, I'm sorry, I lost track. Your second question was?
Yeah, so you're basically, what is your focus go-to-market strategy, Z5 globally? Is it more, and what is the kind of cost involved in terms of direct customer acquisition?
So I think I believe for any OTT, the long-term strategy has to be a very significant direct-to-consumer play. A B2B sort of scenario, or trying to strike up strategic partnerships in different countries. It is a via media for you to eventually establish a direct-to-consumer play, and unless there is an organic demand for your content, unless there is an immediate organic pull to the audience, I don't think in the long run you will ever be able to make sense of the business. Because as opposed to a payment gateway like I don't know, CC Avenue or an Adyen, which takes 3.5-4% of your revenue, to a telco like Robi or Banglalink or Grameenphone or and the likes, which take almost 40 to 50% of your revenue, it immediately stops making sense in the long run. So I think unless you have a huge focus on building out a direct to consumer proposition, in the long run the PNL is never going to look good to you. I'm not at a liberty to disclose the actual the acquisition costs, but yeah,
generally for the industry, how much would that be? Just a benchmarking number.
I
for
think
the industry,
in more evolved markets, and it depends on the price point also, but in more evolved markets like US, Canada, UK, it is upwards of $30 to $35 for a subscriber acquisition. And in lesser markets where things are still evolving, internet infrastructure is still in the process of getting to a place where it should be, these are much lesser. But I think the equation that drives the whole business is your cost of acquisition versus the lifetime value that you can generate out of that consumer. So in evolved markets, even if the cost per acquisition is high, you have a very significant uplift in the lifetime value of a consumer, because these are markets where people have shifted to the digital medium. People are binge watching content, and hence you are generating more usage and more revenue month on month from these consumers, which is not the case in slightly lesser markets like Pakistan and Sri Lanka.
Right, very interesting perspective. Just one point to clarify again from your end, I would need is that, in terms of the cost of customer acquisition, which you clearly mentioned, but also in terms of content reference, okay, and in terms of content investments, which are the kind of countries, firstly, which basically are your key focus, basically, in terms of the go-to market. And secondly, what are the kind of emerging partnership opportunities? Of course, telco is very heavy in India. I'm sure globally also it would be very similar. Telcos would be the heavier ones. But any other trend you can highlight in terms of a new kind of partnerships which have come globally, but they might follow soon in India, but not today, but maybe 2-3 years down the line?
So I think in terms of newer partnerships, one space which is still very underutilized in terms of a platform partnership is the in-flight entertainment business, which is something that we are now trying to actively engage with. The problem in that whole arena is the fact that airlines do not really employ state-of-the-art hardware in terms of their video streaming hardware. The current business purely revolves around syndication of content and not really a platform partnership. But I think even though the progress is slow, I think in the next 5 to 10 years, we are going to hopefully see a scenario where you are inside an airline on your seat, and you are able to sample not just content but different value propositions from different OTT players within that whole console of yours. Currently that console works on a resistive touch technology, which is why I'm saying that even though your personal handheld devices have moved to a much more evolved and sophisticated place, your Airline console is still a resistive touch console. So I think in the next 5 to 10 years, all of that is going to change from the grassroots level. The infra is going to get updated. More and more OTT partnerships are possibly going to take place. And I think, which is why we have decided that this is the right time to engage with that whole value chain and try to find a place for ourselves, so that whenever the inflection point arises, we are in a place where we can make the most out of it.
Right. And also, the smart TV penetration numbers are fairly high in developed markets, right? So have you seen that, the partnerships or the kind of revenue you generate from these smart TV partnerships are very high, or this, because this, I'm just asking this because can this be an opportunity for the India broadcast OTTs also to rely upon smart TVs when the smart TV penetration numbers pick up? Or is it that, they are not one of those spenders, they're not one of those people who will be spending more in terms of, partnerships for content?
So look, I think it depends on how you categorize the whole smart TV ecosystem. There are broadly two primary categories. One is your open market platforms like AFS, Roku, etc. And the other are then your third party fragmented market space with your Samsung and Video and Vizio and Viewed and everything. Uh, unless there is a billing mechanism involved, which is true for an AFS and a Roku, I don't think it even qualifies as a partnership, because otherwise you're just trying to drive discoverability and curation through your smart TV presence and relying on your direct to consumer marketing efforts to drive revenue. So I think in the long run, that is going to be the way, because I think even today on the smart TV platform, and I'm talking about the non-Roku, non-AFS kind of segments, there is no real user journey for a consumer to complete his payment via the smart TV. It eventually ends up you being landed onto a mobile web page, or using some sort of a wallet or a QR code to complete your purchase. And unless there is a billing relationship, I don't think it even qualifies as a partnership per se. So I think smart TVs in the long run are going to be platforms for discoverability and creating more usage in evolved markets, and to that effect, they are going to be hugely significant.
Right. Thanks for that insight. Manpreet, I'll just bring you back here in the conversation. Movie content is something which is really increased in terms of consumption given the lockdown. And of course, the closure of cinemas. We've got only about 40% of screens open worldwide. I'm sure Eros has got a huge catalog in terms of movie content. So can you just highlight some kind of trends, patterns, what we've seen because of the lockdown? How sustainable are these numbers in terms of movie content consumption, for Eros Now as a platform?
So movie content consumption for Eros Now has significantly increased.
Manpreet, your voice is slightly,
can you hear me now?
Can you just come close? Yeah, that's better.
Yeah. Can you hear me? Okay, cool. So I'm saying like movie content consumption per se for Eros Now has actually significantly increased, and I will say this thing out that the larger portion of the content which is available there with us is movies, and which has a great shelf life and a great repeatability factor too. Globally, it has shown a tremendous increase in the consumption and screenplay that what we have seen. So whether it is B2C as a proposition or a model, or it is B2B as a proposition or as a model, this number has vastly increased. And we are actually coming up with many native initiatives, in fact, for the local geographies over there, which is like definitely as a first step, it is the subtitling over there in the English language, which is actually getting transformed over there to subtitling there in the native language also as a second step, which has actually made a great acceptability for the content. And it is going fantastic. We are also doing like some sort of local productions over there. In fact, in the region, so the content is basically Hindi, but it is actually creating a lot of awareness there in the various geographies about the platform, about the content that what we guys are creating, and it's working really well over there for us.
Right, great. Vishnu, let me just bring you back here. Just a couple of strategy questions before we move on to the final question. So the questions here basically for you are, in terms of these go-to markets, when you decide that you want to enter a particular market aggressively, what is the kind of cash burn? What is the kind of time frame? What are the kind of marketing budgets you have? Firstly, when you launch into newer markets, that's one. And second, if you can highlight the competitive intensity by the local OTTs in these markets. I mean, how tough is that, to crack the code and actually get some kind of success there?
So, all of us being in internet businesses, I think the go-to market becomes a lot more flattened out, in my opinion, at a very base level, because availability can happen overnight, right? I mean, we launched globally the day we launched, right? Any country that had internet could access Hoichoi, or for that matter, any other platform for it. To really make inroads, though, I think what we bank on, I mean, we are a little bit of an outlier in this particular case. We sort of bank a lot on our existing community that we built over 25 years. So it's our movies, it's our shows, it's our social pages, etc. To get the real initial buzz out. That's one. So, but there are other strategic markets, like I would say the US, Middle East, Australia is very big for us. Bangladesh obviously is massive for us. So each of them have a very different play for us. Firstly, Bangladesh, we've got an office there. We made 4 original shows there. We've acquired a lot of movies over there. We have a very long-term play over there. We've got a local team, etc. Very different play in that market. In the US, what we do is, again, we partner with some of the key communities that exist in that market. So all of these places have got very lively associations that already operate, and they do various activities, like let's say they'll do a Durga Puja during October, or they will have some sort of a film festival, etc. That might happen. Various touch points, etc. In addition to that, if you've got, in our opinion, one of the biggest problems that OTT has solved for is actually theatrical release across the globe on day one. In spite of how widely spoken or large that market might have been, I don't think even in India you think about Argentina as a release country, right? There might be a very small pocket of people who might speak Hindi or Bengali or whatever other language. With OTT, if a film is releasing, it's releasing globally on the same day, and you're able to reach out to that pocket of customer that exists in Argentina that you might not have the theatrical in that case. So, by having content availability, I think is the best way to get the word out. I think it leads to a lot of inbound traffic, inbound marketing. And our take has been that if you put out the best content possible, create excitement every single week, and I think people make content choices a lot these days out of referrals, out of what they hear, out of the buzz, out of whether they associate with the brand, than just pure marketing, in our opinion.
Right. And generally in terms of the local players there, I mean, how tough is it to crack the code there? Yeah.
Frankly, I think the way I think about this business is that we are in such a nascent stage. I think it's, even if there are 20 more people competing, I think there's enough to go after for the next 10, 20 years, if not 20 years, maybe 10 years. And I think, right now you worry about, getting your word out there, getting as much, the size of the pie to increase, as opposed to really worry about competition per se. I think it's about how can you create the habit of consuming content online, which COVID had a big part to play in the first place. How do you create the incentive for people to pay for content? How do you create enough exciting content that people are, really compelled in some cases to actually pay for content? If you're acting on the export side of things, obviously. And I think those are the kind of things that worry me, maybe, than a lot of these other things. I think I look at every other opportunity as a way to collaborate with people, especially at this stage. Whether it's an e-commerce player, it's a telecom player, it's a retailer, who's selling a mobile phone, who's got a mobile phone shop in some place. Can he become a reseller or subscription? Can it be an ISP? Can it be a cable network? I think all of these places are all great places to collaborate at this stage, I think.
Completely in agreement. Completely. In fact, that's
right.
The difference between is that in India, there is going to be nothing called cord cutting. It's a myth. It's a very Western myth. When you pay $150 for your cable, that's when you wake up and you talk about a $10 and a $7 and a $5. In India, when you pay 500 rupees for cable,
you can't have
everything else that we put out is all going to be what Vishnu said. It's all about, does he want to watch it and is he willing to pay for it? And what is described as an elasticity between the creator, distributor, and the consumer.
Right. I just have, we're just about 5 minutes away now. Just have one last question. If, each of the panelists can give me a 30-second answer on that. So, of course, there are some metrics which work very favorably for India in terms of demographics. The growth is going to be higher. The number of people, smartphone penetration, all these things are fine. But these things are already at some kind of, so to say, high number globally, right? In terms of the cord cutting phenomena, in terms of people wanting to consume content on digital, in terms of the number of people paying for content on digital. These numbers are fairly high abroad as compared to India. Now, for each of your OTTs, what is the kind of opportunity, and how much time do you think that, or probably if you can just put it this way, like, let me put it this way, do you believe that there is a scope that your global overseas subscribers or your global overseas subscription revenue can grow faster versus India? What is your sense on that? If I can just start with Vishnu quickly on that.
No, I mean, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, we get 40% of our revenue from international markets. That's purely a play of the kind of ARPUs that we can charge. In our specific case, I see Bangladesh as being bigger than India at some point, just because of the pure number of people that are there. I think they are a little bit in the early stages of the digital evolution. The data prices are very high. Smartphone penetration is great, but again, the speeds, etc., are not fantastic. But that's why I feel the next 5 to 10 years are going to be massive, and that's it's the fastest growing country in Asia today. So I think that's a massive opportunity for us specifically, and that only speaks Bengali as a language. There's no other native speaker. There's no other language.
Right, Manpreet, was for you. What's your take on the same question? And also one more thing, I also want to get your sense on this direct OTT release phenomena. Do you believe it's sustainable, or do you believe cinemas are here to stay? Just a quick take on that as well.
So I do think this thing like cinemas are definitely going to be here to stay. This is the industry in itself. So it has given a great opportunity. Like this COVID has given a great opportunity to OTT players where the movies are getting released over there directly on the digital platform. But still, like people are pretty much skeptical, in fact, in taking up those decisions because there are high monies involved. And digitally, so to say, like making it a break even, right? I do not see this thing that it is very much possible because there are many cascading revenue streams attached to it, which goes over there to the backfield here, starting with the actors, to the production, and so on and so forth. So the cinemas are definitely going to be here to stay, and this industry will actually grow into togetherness. So both will evolve, digital as well as cinema, and to an extent like the television. Yeah, there is going to be a growth, which is there. The first one, sorry, you asked me.
Yeah, the global subscription, can it outperform versus the India subscription?
I think this thing like we do consider like these are two different geographies, like India as one and outside rest of India as other. So there is a tremendous opportunity to grow, and we guys are growing. We have seen significant growth, but like I can say about myself that we are an Indian company where an OTT platform where the content creation is done based on the consumption patterns, in fact, valued here in Indian consumers. Though there will be a tremendous increase in the revenue flow also from the outside market, but I think over here in India, I think like time can basically tell. So I don't see it like happening in like 5 or 6 years or maybe 7 or 8 years.
Right. Siddharth, your take on the global part?
See, we're a hybrid entity. When I see, for me, my Africa business could be bigger than India because I'm local service. Okay, the comparative for us would not be the same like in others in that sense. The India business today continues to be a very large business for us, but our growth in the Southeast Asian markets, I mean, we're getting to Vietnam, Laos, all of these are local services. It's not that I'm taking South Asian entertainment there. There may be certain content type that you could dub for that market and vice versa, actually, for our markets as well. But, and then we've seen with Korean cinema and Korean content in that sense, where it's allowed for a massive travel across the world in terms of the kind of content which is out there, or even the telenovas that come in from Spain and in from Latin America. So I think overall, from a hybrid perspective, we look at each market separately, because we look and try and figure out if in this market we need to localize the experience in that sense. With regards to cinemas and the pay-per-view stack and the fact that can we have a day and date release with theatrical or otherwise, I'm in complete this thing with Manpreet as well. I do not believe that the theatrical experience, Karan, can ever be changed. It's a 70 experience. You go with family, you go and watch that experience. Koi ghar mein, no house in India, in that sense, can live up to that core experience that a 70 screen gives you when you're watching that content. Having said that, there is a play for a certain kind of content which will not go to theatrical and has a play in pay-per-view. We've been representing Warner on the pay-per-view stack, which is a TVOD stack for the longest time. It's 7 years running. We do day and date with the US with them. To just share with you, of the 22, 25 films that we end up releasing, there is roughly only 10 to 12 that you guys see in theaters. There's another 12, 15 that come to us in various genres that actually doesn't even have a theatrical release, not because of COVID, but it's been pre-COVID for years. Horror, a certain kind of animation, all of that is available within the pay-per-view stack. So as what Vishnu was saying, if that content is available and you've got communities that you can segment and go out to, and they're willing to buy that content, you've got a story out there. You've got an ability to build out a sustainable business, because India is big and there are sizable segments. If you have them and these communities can be driven to discovery, you've got a story to tell.
Right, very interesting. Abhar, if you can also share on the SWOT part, can your global subscription revenue or the subscriber base grow at a faster pace versus your India subscription or India subscriber base or revenue? If you can just share some trends on that.
I think global revenues are definitely already growing at a faster pace than India. But unless a service chooses to double down on a market and become a local or a mainstream player, as Siddharth mentioned, if you are still going to be catering to South Asian diaspora across the globe, it is definitely going to, in terms of absolute value, it's going to remain lower than India. But I think in terms of driving profitability and bottom line, I think over a period of time, even if you choose to stay a South Asian diaspora catering player, over a period of time, you will be contributing more to the bottom line, at least, if not overall volumes of business.
Right, correct. So that's all in terms of discussions we had. I think we just opened the floor for the Q&A session. Just give me a second. So there's one question basically, asking on this fragmentation of the OTT market. So the question talks about that, the OTT market is highly fragmented. So as an OTT player, how do you balance your budgets between the long form and the short form kind of content? Anyone who can take on this?
Vishnu, you do both parts and you're a creator. So it would be interesting for you to take this. We are aggregators.
Sure.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I don't know if it's a balancing act. I think it all starts, in our case, with a story. And because we make film content, TV content, and now web content, the way we start out with is just purely with the idea, and we think which is the best format to tell that story in. How can we best depict that story? How can we best, get the audience hooked onto that particular story? If it's a film, we make a film out of it. If it's a TV show more akin to the kind of audiences that exist in that market, we'll do that. So because we operate a little bit across that ecosystem, I think is dictated by the story as opposed to budget considerations or where it would be the most profitable, or you have to a little bit be true to that art, I guess.
We Karan look at it very differently. The way we look at it, depending on the regional markets that you're going, what is the aggregation that is available there in our service? And does that per se address the need of the user for him to be able to put out a propensity to pay for the service? And then you balance it out by bringing in original content to satiate that requirement. And that's how you build out your core ability to put a product out there, which the user puts money to. So it's market by market, language by language. You actually segment and see what is the consumer fitment, and you ask a single question: what's in it for the consumer?
Right, right. So I think just to summarize whatever discussions we've had today on this panel, I think of course global is a big opportunity. You may see a situation wherein global subscriber base can actually grow much faster. I think this entire OTT and telco is more of a partnership than a fight, and I think globally there are many more emerging opportunities of partnerships beyond telcos and smart TVs. Clearly, the trend of this direct OTT release on cinema is not sustainable. We are going to find a balanced approach in terms of content hitting directly and content going on cinemas. So yeah, I mean, very good times ahead, for OTTs which are built in India, but have a very large scope of growth coming from the overseas market. Something which is a very promising story in my view. So thank you very much, all the panelists, for taking your time out. It's indeed a pleasure to get all your insights. Please take care.